The house was unusually quiet that afternoon. Chike had returned from his office early, thanks to an abrupt board meeting cancellation. He stepped into the compound and noticed the houseboy wasn't around, which irritated him. He hated calling people twice. As he entered through the back door to avoid the main entrance, he noticed the guest room door slightly ajar. The bathroom light inside flickered through the open space. His shirt clung to his back from the heat, and all he wanted was a cold shower. Assuming the guest bathroom was empty, as it usually was, he pushed the door open without knocking. And there she was, Ngozi, his wife's younger sister, completely nude, standing beside the sink with her back turned. She was drying her neck with a towel, oblivious to the fact that someone had entered. It took her a moment to realize someone was there. When she finally turned, her eyes locked with Chike's, and for a moment the entire world froze. She gasped softly and instinctively covered her breast with the towel, but she didn't scream. That scream, the one that could have ended everything right there, never came. Chike should have turned away, should have said "I'm sorry," and walked out like a decent man. But he didn't. His eyes lingered too long. Ngozi noticed, and for a brief second, she lowered the towel slightly, her expression unreadable. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't exactly seduction, but it wasn't innocence either. Chike took a step closer, then another. The air grew heavier with something dangerous and unspoken. His hand reached for the towel. She didn't stop him. His touch was trembling, conflicted, but determined. She stood frozen, letting him pull her toward the bathroom wall. When their bodies finally touched, there was a strange silence between them, one that couldn't be explained with words or morals. It was reckless, it was forbidden, and it had just begun. Afterward, they didn't speak. Ngozi wrapped herself in a towel and walked past him as if nothing had happened. Chike stood in the same spot for minutes, hands on his head, staring into the mirror like it would offer answers or mercy. Shame wrapped around him like a wet cloth. What had he done? This wasn't some random stranger. This was his wife's baby sister, the same girl who used to call him brother-in-law with pride, who had once wept in his presence when Amara was admitted into the hospital for malaria. And now they shared a secret that had no name, no reason, no morality. When Amara returned home that evening and kissed him cheerfully, asking how his day went, Chike's stomach tightened. Guilt didn't scream that day. It whispered, quietly, just like Ngozi had. Chike expected everything to collapse by the next morning. He couldn't sleep that night. He kept imagining Ngozi knocking on Amara's door and telling her what happened. He envisioned suitcases being packed, family members being called, and his name being permanently written in disgrace. But nothing happened. Ngozi walked around the house like she always did. She greeted Amara with a bright smile and even made breakfast, pap and akara, Chike's favorite. Her eyes barely met his, but when they did it was calm, controlled, as if what had happened in the bathroom never occurred. That scared Chike even more. The silence wasn't just forgiving, it was complicit. It carried a dangerous message. I am not done with you. That afternoon, while Amara worked from her laptop in the dining area, Chike noticed Ngozi passing by in a pair of tight leggings and a tank top. She paused briefly, glanced at him, and smiled, just enough for him to know that her silence had a price. Days passed, and the unspoken tension grew thicker. Ngozi began to test boundaries. She would bend slightly lower when picking something off the floor in his presence, or walk past him after bathing with her towel hanging looser than necessary. Each time, Chike's guilt battled his desire, but guilt kept losing. He became jumpy around Amara, answering her questions too fast or holding her longer than usual, like a man trying to prove something. Amara, in her usual trusting self, didn't notice the shift. She was swamped with reports from work and often thanked Ngozi for keeping the home lively in her absence. One night, Chike walked past Ngozi's door and heard her humming softly to herself. When he peeked, she was lying on her bed, flipping through a magazine. She didn't invite him in. She didn't need to. He knew then that the door between them hadn't just opened. It had disappeared entirely. Ngozi's silence became more powerful than any words she could have spoken. Her behavior shifted from subtle to bold. She would laugh louder when Chike was around, touch his shoulder lightly during conversation, and make inside jokes that excluded Amara. Still, Amara noticed nothing, or chose not to. Chike tried to keep distance, but temptation grew claws. One evening, while Amara was hosting a virtual board meeting from the bedroom, Ngozi brushed past Chike in the hallway and whispered, "You look stressed. Need help relaxing?" He froze. His body betrayed his mind. That night, he sat in bed beside Amara, pretending to listen to her talk about her plans for promotion, but all he could think about was the woman in the next room. Not a stranger, not a friend, his wife's sister. And worst of all, she didn't want to stop. The first night it happened properly, completely, was a night Amara worked late and called home to say she'd be back around midnight. The call came while Chike was on the couch, eyes glued to a sports channel, but mind spiraling in guilt. Ngozi was in the kitchen, making Ifo Riro, humming to herself like a woman who'd already won. After the call, he turned off the television and walked into his bedroom, but sleep refused him. It wasn't long before he heard the soft knock on his door. He opened it, expecting to see the houseboy or hear a request about the water heater. But there she stood, Ngozi, wearing only a black camisole and pink satin shorts. She didn't say a word. She walked past him into the room, closed the door, and sat on the edge of his bed. Chike's legs trembled. His hands felt useless. He asked, "What are you doing?" She replied, "What we both already started." That night was no longer an accident. There was no confusion, no accidental touches or excuses. Ngozi laid on his bed like she belonged there, and Chike, cowardly and shame-filled, climbed on top of her like he had no vows. They moved like addicts, gripping, grasping, consuming. Chike was sure it would be the last time. He told himself so, whispering it like a prayer as he held her. But when it was over, and Ngozi looked into his eyes and smiled, he knew he was lying. "You taste like her," she whispered. That sentence destroyed whatever barrier remained. It was no longer a secret. It was a second relationship, cloaked in darkness, buried under deceit, and thriving on silence. When Amara finally returned that night, she kissed Chike's forehead as he pretended to sleep. She didn't know her husband was still panting on the inside. She didn't know her sister's perfume still lingered on their bedsheets. In the days that followed, Chike was a haunted man. The guilt that once screamed had become an echo, constant but ignorable. Ngozi acted more confident around him, more entitled. She no longer avoided him in public. In fact, she began to act like his second wife, making jokes that only he understood, calling him Odogwu, whenever Amara wasn't looking. He wanted to stop. He truly did. But Ngozi had tasted power, and he had tasted her. And now, the line was permanently crossed. Amara, in her innocence, began talking about maybe trying for a baby next year. Chike nodded, smiled, and kissed her forehead, while thinking about the woman he'd already entered again just 2 nights ago. In the same house, in the same bed. The betrayal had now become a routine. The air in the house had changed, but Amara couldn't feel it. She still laughed loudly at her sister's jokes and kissed her husband goodnight without hesitation. But beneath the walls, betrayal was growing teeth. Chike avoided mirrors. They had become judges, reminding him of what he had done every time he looked into his own eyes. At work, he found it difficult to concentrate. Simple reports took longer to review. During meetings, his mind wandered to the dangerous games being played in his home. Every time he heard Ngozi laugh, his stomach twisted. Yet, he couldn't stop returning to her. There was something both frightening and thrilling about the fact that she wasn't accusing him. She was seducing him. He started coming home early, pretending to be sick, just to have stolen hours with her before Amara returned. It wasn't love. It wasn't even lust anymore. It was addiction. And guilt had become a ghost he'd grown comfortable sleeping beside. Ngozi, on the other hand, blossomed. Her skin glowed brighter, her eyes sparkled with hidden knowledge, and her steps were more confident. She began wearing Amara's clothes without asking, lounging on the couch like a wife-in-waiting. She started to cook Chike's favorites regularly, and Amara praised her, laughing that her sister would make a man very lucky someday. Chike could barely sit through these conversations. The irony nearly killed him. One night over dinner, Amara thanked Chaik for being so kind and Ngozi, saying it warmed her heart that he treated her sister like blood. Ngozi shot him a look across the table, one that said she has no idea what we share. That night, as Amara slept soundly beside him, Chaik got a message from Ngozi. Rooms open. No need to knock. He didn't go. Not that night. But he didn't delete the message either. And that was enough proof of a war within him. Chaik made a weak attempt to stop the affair. He avoided Ngozi's room, stopped replying her flirty messages, refused to meet her gaze in the hallway. For 3 days, he tried. 3 whole days. But Ngozi didn't flinch. She didn't beg or ask why he'd changed. She simply waited. Then, on the 4th night, she walked into the kitchen while he was making tea and brushed her body against his, pressing her palm against his chest. "You can lie to yourself, but not to your body," she whispered. He broke. Again. They kissed beside the fridge, too hungry to reach a bed. Guilt didn't stop him. It had been replaced by routine. And so, the silence in the house grew louder, while Amara, blinded by her trust, remained the only person unaware that the walls around her marriage were crumbling with every breath. Amara always believed marriage was about timing and patience. She and Chaik had agreed early in their union not to rush children, especially since her career was climbing fast at the bank. They had goals: buy property, invest, build. Children would come later. But recently, her heart had shifted. Watching her friends cradle babies and speak about late-night feeds with glowing eyes had stirred something soft in her. One night, while Chaik lay on the bed scrolling through his phone, she turned to him and said, "I think maybe it's time. Maybe we should try for our own." Chaik froze. The screen of his phone dimmed, but his mind went blank. In that instant, the weight of his betrayal became unbearable. He muttered something about stress and work, suggesting they revisit the topic next year. Amara smiled and nodded, not realizing he couldn't even look at her without imagining her sister. After the conversation, Amara did what she always did when confused. She turned to Ngozi. One afternoon in the kitchen, she asked her sister for advice. "Do you think I'm being selfish, waiting this long for a baby?" Ngozi, with her back turned while stirring ogbono soup, smiled gently. "No, sis. You've always been driven. Chaik loves you for that. And the baby will come when God says it's time." Amara hugged her from behind, grateful. Ngozi's smile never faded, but her eyes were cold. Later that night, while Amara was taking a long bath, Chaik passed by Ngozi's door. It creaked open. Inside, she lay on the bed in Amara's red satin robe, legs crossed, one shoulder bare. "I heard you're not ready for a baby," she said, without looking up. Chaik's throat dried. "Maybe someone else already is." He closed the door behind him. The betrayal was no longer quiet, it was deliberate. Chaik was now living 2 lives under one roof. One with a woman he vowed to love and protect. The other with a woman who had become an expert at pretending. Ngozi no longer flinched when they were in the same room with Amara. In fact, she began helping Amara plan romantic dinner nights, then sneaking into Chaik's room after dessert. Chaik began to notice the growing difference between the 2 sisters. Amara was calm, focused, always planning. Ngozi was wild, reactive, spontaneous. And he hated himself for craving that chaos. One Sunday afternoon, while watching a movie in the living room, Amara fell asleep on Chaik's shoulder. Ngozi, sitting across from them, slowly crossed and uncrossed her legs, staring directly into Chaik's eyes. His heart raced. His wife slept beside him. His lover teased him openly. And guilt was long dead. Only habit remained. Sin had become normal. And Amara had no idea that her sister's womb would soon carry the child she thought they were planning together. Ngozi hadn't been feeling well. It started with mild nausea, then fatigue. She dismissed it at first, maybe it was bad suya or stress. But when she missed her period, her heart skipped. The first test she bought from the local pharmacy showed 2 lines. She took another. Same result. The third one, digital this time, left no room for doubt. Pregnant. For weeks. She sat on the bathroom floor for a long time, heart pounding. Her mind went to Chaik. Would he rejoice? Would he panic? Would he reject the baby, like the mistake he's too cowardly to admit? She wasn't sure. But one thing she knew, she wasn't getting rid of the child. She stood up, washed her face, and stared at her reflection in the mirror. "I'm going to be a mother," she whispered. And somehow, deep inside, it felt like revenge against a sister who had everything, except the one thing that mattered now, fruitfulness. When Ngozi told Chike, his face turned pale. They met secretly at the back of a shopping plaza, where no one would recognize them. "What did you just say?" he asked, voice cracking. "I'm pregnant," she repeated, calm but firm. Chike's hands trembled. You have to remove it. Ngozi, this can't happen. Do you know what this will do to us? To your sister?" Ngozi laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Us? There is no us. There's you, a man who couldn't keep it in his pants, and me, a woman who decided not to play victim. This child is happening, Chike." His eyes widened. No, you don't understand. We made a mistake. Please." But Ngozi stepped back. "You made a mistake. I made a decision." Then she walked away, hand on her belly, already protecting the life growing inside her. And for the first time, Chike felt what true fear tasted like. That night, he couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, while Amara lay beside him, gently snoring. He turned to face her, her peaceful face breaking his soul further. How would he tell her? Could he? No, he wouldn't. He would beg Ngozi again, find a way to make her vanish, send her abroad, anything but this. Meanwhile, in the next room, Ngozi stared at the ceiling too, her hand resting over her flat belly. She didn't need to ask for approval. She didn't need a man's permission. This baby wasn't just a child, it was leverage. Proof that she wasn't second to her sister. That she could have something Amara, in all her beauty and success, had failed to produce. She whispered to her stomach, "You're mine, and no one will take you away." She smiled, cruel and determined. The game had changed. The war was no longer secret. It had just been conceived. Ngozi stood before the full-length mirror in the guest room, examining the barely visible swell of her stomach. She'd begun feeling the tightness in her waist, the discomfort in her bras, the dry taste in her mouth. But to the world, especially to Amara, she was just her usual self. Calm, soft-spoken, sweetly deceptive. She knew Amara would notice soon enough, and she had prepared her story days in advance. That evening, she waited until they were cooking together in the kitchen, the smell of stew and fried plantain in the air, before casually mentioning, "I think I'm pregnant." Amara turned sharply, wide-eyed with a mix of confusion and excitement. "Wait, what? How?" Ngozi looked down, acting bashful, then said, "It's someone I've been talking to. You don't know him. He's based in Canada. We've been seeing each other low-key since before I came to Lagos." Amara's jaw dropped in delight. She hugged her sister tightly, eyes glistening with joy. "Ngozi, you didn't tell me? That's amazing." The lie went down so smoothly, it tasted sweeter than truth. The next few days were filled with laughter, congratulations, and emotional bonding. Amara posted subtle celebratory updates on WhatsApp, telling friends she would soon become an auntie. She dragged Ngozi to the hospital for antenatal registration, even paid for the first set of scans. Chike watched in quiet horror as the lie deepened. During dinner, Amara would randomly place her hand on Ngozi's belly and say, "You're carrying a blessing." Ngozi would smile sweetly and nod, while locking eyes with Chike across the table. It became a game for her, a cruel, silent game. Chike tried multiple times to convince her in secret. He cornered her in the laundry room, in the backyard, even inside his car one Sunday after church. But each time, she made it clear, she wasn't getting rid of the child. Not for him. Not for anyone. "You'll thank me someday," she whispered once, brushing her hand across his chest like a wife comforting a stressed husband. Chike pulled away, sweating. She wasn't scared. He was. Meanwhile, Amara had begun creating fantasies around Ngozi's fictitious Canadian lover. "You'll introduce us when he comes back, right?" she asked one morning while ironing her work blouse. Ngozi nodded eagerly. "Of course. You'll love him. He's gentle, thoughtful, very supportive." Chike coughed from the corner of the room, almost choking on his tea. Ngozi glanced at him without flinching. The lie had wings now, and Amara was flying with it. That weekend, Amara threw a surprise baby shower for her sister, inviting friends from church, colleagues from the bank, and even some of Chike's relatives. The house was full of pink and blue balloons, cupcakes shaped like baby bottles, and a large "Congratulations, Ngozi" banner. Ngozi cried fake tears. Chike drank in silence. Amara stood by her sister's side, laughing, dancing, unaware that she was celebrating a betrayal sleeping just a few doors away. And when Ngozi hugged her tightly that evening and whispered, "Thank you for everything," Amara smiled and replied, "Anything for you. You're my sister." If only she knew what that sister was truly carrying. Amara returned from work that night feeling heavier than usual, not physically, but emotionally. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the framed wedding photo on the wall. She looked so happy in it. Chike's arms were around her, his forehead touching hers. Back then, they were hopeful. She remembered their first year of marriage, filled with late-night conversations about dreams and legacy, their promise to wait a few years before having kids. They agreed to build first. But now, with Ngozi's baby on the way, something inside Amara began to ache. She felt left behind. At work, younger women had gone on maternity leave and returned with glowing skin and baby photos. She smiled for them, but returned to her desk and swallowed tears. She wasn't jealous, she was just scared. What if it was already too late? What if she'd waited too long? That night, she turned to Chike and said, "Maybe we should start trying now." He looked up from his phone, lips pressed tight, and nodded too quickly. "Sure," he mumbled. "Maybe." But Chike didn't mean it. He couldn't. Every time Amara brought up children now, he felt trapped. His life was already tangled with a secret baby he didn't want. Pretending to plan for another child, one Amara didn't know would be her nephew and stepson, was like standing on a cliff with no way down. He started finding excuses to stay late at work or travel for imaginary meetings. When home, he was distracted, uninterested in touch, and easily irritated. Amara, ever patient, chalked it up to stress. She offered to cook more, took time off work just to pamper him, even brought him lunch at the office one afternoon. But the truth was, Chike wasn't avoiding stress. He was avoiding reality. The weight of his double life pressed into his spine, shrinking him. He had no safe space anymore. Even when lying next to his wife, he felt watched by his sins. And the worst part was, Ngozi didn't seem burdened by any of it. She carried her pregnancy like a crown. Amara began keeping her struggles to herself. When her period came again, she cried in the bathroom but wiped her tears before returning to the living room. She joined fertility forums online, started drinking herbal mixtures her colleague recommended, and even booked an appointment with a specialist, alone. At night, she would watch Chike sleeping and wonder if he'd fallen out of love with her. The silence between them grew, but she kept filling it with hope. One day, while folding Ngozi's maternity gowns, she ran her hand over the soft fabric and smiled. "At least I'll be an auntie," she whispered, unaware that the child growing in that cloth shadow had her husband's nose. Ngozi walked in at that moment, belly round, face glowing, and hugged her from behind. "You'll be the best auntie in the world." Amara chuckled, her eyes glassy. "Maybe one day I'll be a mummy too." Ngozi only smiled, but her silence said everything. She already was. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The clouds rolled in like witnesses, heavy with thunder, as if the heavens themselves knew a storm was coming. Amara was at work when the call came in. Ngozi had gone into labor. She dropped everything, rushed out of her office, and sped to the hospital. Chike had already been informed, but pretended to be surprised when Amara called him, screaming in joy. "She's having a baby," she cried, nearly breathless. He said all the right words. "Oh wow, that's sudden. I'm on my way." But his heart pounded for a different reason. This wasn't just a baby being born. This was the physical manifestation of all his lies. The evidence he couldn't hide anymore. At the hospital, Ngozi was wheeled into the delivery ward while Amara held her hand tightly, whispering prayers. "You're strong. You've got this," she said. Ngozi only winced in pain and locked eyes with Chike standing quietly in the hallway. That moment was the first time fear crept into her eyes too. The child came with a wail that silenced everyone. A baby boy, healthy, full of life, and loud. Amara cried tears of joy, dancing slightly in the ward corridor. "A boy," she repeated, hugging Chike. "You're an uncle now." The word hit him like acid. Uncle. How could he be both uncle and father to the same child? He nodded, unable to speak. When he finally walked into the room, Ngozi was holding the baby to her chest, eyes tired but proud. Their eyes met, and Chike didn't have to ask. He saw himself in the child. The same nose, the same sharp brow line. It was him, flesh of his flesh. Ngozi raised the child to him, whispering, "Meet your son." Chike looked around nervously, closed the door behind him, and whispered, "We can't keep this up. It's getting too risky." But Ngozi shook her head. Too late. He's here. He's ours. And just like that, a new chapter of their betrayal was born. Amara spent the night at the hospital, tending to her sister, helping the nurses, carrying the baby, with so much love it could make an onlooker cry. She took photos, sent them to family groups, and even made a small video of herself singing to the child. "I already love you like my own," she whispered into the camera, unaware she was speaking to her husband's son. Chike stayed distant, pacing the corridor, feeling like a ghost at his own funeral. His name wasn't on the birth certificate. His existence was erased in official documents, but written clearly across the baby's face. When they returned home 2 days later, Amara had decorated the house with balloons and a "Welcome Baby" banner. Neighbors came to congratulate them. Food was shared. Everyone smiled. But behind closed doors, 3 people knew the truth. One was guilty, one was proud, and one was in love with a lie so thick it wrapped around her like a blanket. The baby's cries filled the night, but it was the silence between Chike and Ngozi that screamed the loudest. The house was lively again. For weeks after Junior's birth, it echoed with the sounds of laughter, cooing, and the innocent cries of a baby who had no idea he was born into a web of secrets. Amara had fully immersed herself in Auntie Judy's. She cooked, cleaned, rocked Junior to sleep, and stayed up at night when Ngozi was too tired to nurse. It gave her a new sense of purpose, a way to nurture something while her own womb remained silent. Every time she looked into Junior's eyes, something stirred in her, a bittersweet longing mixed with joy. She began praying more fervently for a child of her own, waking at midnight to weep and pour her heart out to God. "I've waited, Lord. I've been faithful. Give me my own," she whispered night after night, unaware that the child she called nephew carried her husband's blood. The betrayal nestled in her arms daily, but still she saw nothing. It was during one of those restless nights that Amara's mother came to visit. Mama Ebel was a woman of strong opinions, steeped in traditional beliefs, and loud about them. The moment she arrived, she examined Junior closely and declared, "This child looks like Chike O. Strong nose, same ears." Everyone laughed. Chike's face froze. Ngozi quickly changed the subject, asking about pepper soup. But Mama wasn't done. Over dinner, she looked at Amara and said bluntly, "You need to start taking this baby matter seriously. All your mates have children. Ngozi has given us one without even marrying. And you, the wife, are still going up and down with office bags." The words cut through Amara like a hot blade. She tried to laugh it off, but her eyes betrayed her. Chike sat silently, chewing slowly, eyes lowered, saying nothing to defend her. Ngozi just smirked into her plate. Later that night, after Mama had gone to bed, Amara wept in the bathroom. The humiliation, though casual, was real. She knelt before the sink, tears running down her face, asking herself if maybe she had truly failed. Was she cursed? Was her womb locked by forces unknown? She thought about everything she had sacrificed, her youth, her energy, her body, for her career, and now all it bought her was coldness in marriage and whispers behind her back. Chike stood at the door, listening but not entering. He didn't know how to comfort her anymore. Every touch now felt like another lie. When she finally emerged, she smiled faintly and whispered, "I'll try harder." Chike nodded like a coward. And Ngozi? She lay in bed, breastfeeding the child, humming a lullaby. When she looked up and caught Chaik's eyes across the hallway, she winked. The message was clear. Your wife is still begging. I've already given you what she's praying for. For years past, Junior had grown into a lively, smart, and adorable child. His laughter filled the house, his drawings plastered the fridge, and his tiny footsteps echoed through the halls. To the outside world, he was Ngozi's son by a mysterious foreign lover who had gone silent, but sent money from time to time. To Amara, he was the light in their home, the child who gave her a reason to come home from work early and read bedtime stories. She doted on him endlessly, buying him gifts, packing his lunch for school, even enrolling him in an elite private nursery school with her own money. Meanwhile, Chaik had started showing signs of withdrawal, not from Junior, but from Amara. His kisses grew colder, his conversations shorter, and his nights out longer. Whenever Amara brought it up, he would say, "I'm just tired," or "work is hectic." But the truth was deeper. His affection had shifted, silently and shamefully, toward the child that wasn't supposed to exist, and the woman who refused to disappear. Chaik had begun visiting Ngozi in her new flat, an apartment he secretly paid for and furnished under the guise of helping the mother of his nephew. He told Amara that Ngozi needed space to raise the child and focus on her catering business, which she had recently started. Amara believed him, even encouraged it, proud that her husband was doing right by her sister. But what she didn't know was that Chaik spent more time at Ngozi's than he did at work. He would pick up Junior from school, take him for ice cream, help him with homework, and sometimes sleep over under the pretense of a late meeting. Junior had started calling him Uncle Daddy by accident, once in front of neighbors. When Chaik tried to scold him, Ngozi laughed and said, "He's just a child. Don't overthink it." But Chaik was overthinking everything now. The lie had grown too large. His wife adored the very child who was slowly replacing her in his life, and he didn't know how to stop the wave of destruction he had set into motion. Back at home, Amara noticed the changes, but chose denial over conflict. Her heart couldn't bear another rejection. She started planning weekend getaways to reignite their spark, but Chaik always had a reason not to go. Ngozi needs help with the child. There's a deadline at the office. I have a board meeting. Each excuse chipped at her spirit, but she smiled through it all. In church, they still held hands during worship. On social media, they still posted couple pictures on anniversaries. But inside, Amara was slowly bleeding. She prayed, she fasted. She visited herbalists in secret, all in pursuit of one thing: motherhood. She believed it would fix everything. Meanwhile, Ngozi lived comfortably, Junior thrived, and Chaik slipped further away. The marriage hadn't exploded. It hadn't ended. It was simply dying, quietly, politely, while betrayal tucked itself beneath layers of family dinners and fake laughter. Amara sat by the dining table alone, staring at the chocolate cake she had ordered for herself. There were balloons tied to the chairs, soft music playing in the background, and a new dress hanging in the room, still unworn. It was her birthday, a quiet one, just the way she liked it. But Chaik had forgotten. No message, no call, no gift, nothing. She waited the entire day, even texted him a subtle, "Hey babe, how's work?" to remind him. His reply came hours later. "Busy day. Talk later." That was all. She stared at her phone for a long time, tears welling in her eyes, but she smiled anyway. "It's fine," she whispered to herself. "People forget things." But it wasn't the forgetting that broke her. It was the reality that he didn't care enough to remember. Her heart cracked in silence. Still, she lit a candle on the cake, closed her eyes, and whispered a wish. "God, just give me one thing of my own." Meanwhile, at Ngozi's apartment across town, Chaik was laughing as Junior danced around the living room in his school uniform. Ngozi had made ogbono soup, Chaik's favorite, and the scent filled the apartment. It was a small celebration. Junior had just received his first school prize for academic excellence. Chaik had driven him there himself, cheered the loudest, and proudly posted a blurred photo of the boy holding his certificate. He captioned it, "Proud Uncle Moments." But the comments under the post told another story. One friend wrote, "That boy really looks like you owe." Another said, "Uncle indeed, face with tears of joy." Chaik ignored them. but his hand shook. Ngozi, on the other hand, was glowing. She served the food, kissed Chaik lightly on the cheek, and whispered, "You've done well." Chaik smiled, but a part of him flinched. Deep down, he knew he had betrayed the only woman who ever truly loved him. Yet here he was, celebrating with the wrong woman on the right woman's birthday. That night, Amara posted a simple photo of herself on Instagram, smiling in her untouched birthday dress with the caption, "Grateful, hopeful, patient." Chaik didn't like or comment on it. Neither did Ngozi. That silence stung more than any insult. Amara's friend from the bank called her, confused. "Where's Chaik?" Amara laughed softly and said he was traveling. It was easier than admitting the truth she was too ashamed to confront. In her room, she sat on the floor, phone beside her, and wept quietly into her palms. She didn't know why the pain hurt more than before. Maybe because now it was becoming obvious that something was truly gone. Not just time, not just attention, but love. The man who once called her his world had now given her nothing, not even a birthday text. And still, in another part of town, the same man was cradling the child born of betrayal, feeding him cake, and humming lullabies he had once sung for her. The small cracks in Amara's marriage were no longer invisible. They were showing, subtle, yes, but undeniable. And yet, she fought them with everything she had. She overcompensated. When Chaik grew colder, she became warmer. When he forgot, she remembered. When he stayed away, she stayed available. But what broke her heart more than anything else was noticing how Junior, whom she had loved and raised like her own, was slowly growing closer to Chaik in ways she couldn't explain. She walked in one day and saw Chaik tying Junior's shoelace with such affection it stunned her. He kissed the boy's forehead and whispered, "You're a smart boy, just like Daddy." Amara smiled at the moment, but later that night, she kept replaying those words, "just like Daddy." It was innocent enough on the surface, but something about it didn't sit right with her. Why was Chaik so involved now? Why did he take Junior to school more than Ngozi did? Why did Junior cry more for Chaik than for her own mother? The answers came in pieces. A neighbor jokingly remarked, "That boy looks exactly like your husband, Amara. You sure he's not your child?" Amara laughed nervously, brushing it off, but inside, her stomach dropped. The comment haunted her for days. She went through old photos of Chaik as a boy and compared them to Junior's school portraits. The resemblance was startling. Same sharp nose, same ears, same almond-shaped eyes. But her mind refused to accept the possibility. It couldn't be. Ngozi had told her about the boyfriend from Canada. She had seen Ngozi cry over his silence. She had watched her sister endure childbirth alone. But then why was Chaik always there now? Why was he secretly paying for a new laptop for Junior? And why, just days ago, had Amara seen Chaik slipping an envelope of cash into Ngozi's hand when they thought she wasn't looking? She didn't confront either of them. Not yet. She wasn't ready. She wanted to believe the betrayal hadn't gone that far. But deep inside, a storm was gathering, and it was no longer one she could ignore. Then the slip happened. One lazy Saturday afternoon, as Amara and Junior painted with watercolors in the living room, she asked him gently, "So, what did your mummy pack for school yesterday?" Junior shrugged and smiled. "Uncle Daddy bought me meat pie. I love his meat pie." Amara blinked. "What did you say?" He giggled, swinging his legs. "Uncle Daddy. That's what Mummy calls him sometimes. She said it's our little secret." Amara dropped the paintbrush. Her hands trembled. She smiled faintly to keep him calm, but excused herself and walked into her bedroom, locking the door. She pressed her hands to her mouth to muffle the scream that wanted to erupt. Her heart shattered in silence. That phrase, "Uncle Daddy," had just confirmed her deepest fear. Something was very, very wrong. And the worst part? Her sister had told a 6-year-old to keep it a secret. That was no accident. That was calculation. That was cruelty. And suddenly, Amara no longer felt like a wife, or even a sister. She felt like a fool. The house, once filled with shared laughter and loud dinners, now echoed with avoidance. Chaik no longer pretended. He still wore his wedding ring, still ate at the dining table, still offered one-word responses to Amara's questions, but his soul had long moved out. He was physically present, emotionally absent. Some days, he came home by midnight, claiming traffic. Some days he didn't come home at all, saying he was staying over at a cousin's in Lekki. Amara stopped asking. The more she asked, the more he lied. The more he lied, the more she died inside. She would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, counting the minutes, wondering where her husband was, wondering who he was holding. Her pillow became her only listener. Her WhatsApp chats were filled with blue ticks and no replies. Her heart was filled with bruises and no healing. Meanwhile, Chaik moved through life like a man chasing freedom, but only finding deeper guilt. Ngozi, now running a booming online food business thanks to Chaik's support, had blossomed. Her skin glowed, her confidence sparkled, and her presence became more dominating in family gatherings. Amara began to see it, how her sister no longer deferred to her as the elder one. She talked over her, interrupted her, sometimes even corrected her in front of others. And Chaik never said a word. If anything, he nodded. The final straw came when Amara hosted a small dinner party, and Ngozi wore one of her old designer dresses without asking. Amara said nothing that night. But later, when she tried to talk to Chaik about boundaries, he said, "She's your sister. Why are you acting like a stranger?" The words bruised her. It was the way he said it, the tone. Like she was the problem. Like she was paranoid. She began to wonder if she was losing her mind. But no, she wasn't paranoid. She was perceptive. The betrayal was no longer hiding. It was sitting on the couch beside her, smiling. One night, after waiting for Chaik until almost 2 a.m., Amara heard a car door close outside. She rushed to the window and saw Chaik stepping out of the car, but he wasn't alone. Ngozi sat in the passenger seat, laughing about something. Chaik reached across and touched her cheek. It was soft, intimate, far beyond what any brother-in-law should do. Amara watched from the darkness of the curtain, her entire world collapsing quietly. She didn't confront him. She simply climbed into bed, lay flat, and stared at the ceiling. Her breath was shallow, her body numb. She finally knew. She didn't have solid proof, but she had enough. She had Junior's words. She had their body language. She had her instincts. Her womb was empty, but her heart was full of pain. And now, the ache was no longer just about a child. It was about everything she had poured into a man who was now pouring himself into her sister. It was a Sunday afternoon. Amara had just returned from church alone. Chaik had claimed to be too tired, though she knew better. She walked into the living room to find Junior watching cartoons, his tiny feet swinging from the edge of the couch. He jumped up and hugged her tightly. "Auntie Amara," he squealed. She carried him into her lap, kissed his forehead, and asked about church. He told her he went with Mummy and Uncle Daddy. Again, that phrase. It stung worse each time. She forced a smile and continued asking casual questions, listening carefully to his innocent answers. Then he said something that made her heart drop. "When I grow up, I want to live with both my daddies. But Mummy said I already have one." Amara blinked. "What do you mean?" Junior shrugged. "She said I don't need another daddy, because the one I have is always here." He smiled proudly. "She said I was born from love." Amara's hands began to shake. Her breath quickened. She hugged Junior tighter than usual and whispered, "Do you know who your daddy is?" Junior paused and then whispered back, "You know him. He's always with Mummy. But it's a secret. She said it's only for grown-ups." Amara felt the floor beneath her shift. Her vision blurred. Everything she feared had just been confirmed by the very child she loved like her own. She nodded slowly, set Junior down gently, and walked to her bedroom like a zombie. Once inside, she collapsed to the floor, weeping like a woman whose soul had been torn in half. All the nights she rocked him to sleep, all the diapers she changed, all the food she paid for, the school fees, the lullabies, all of it was betrayal. She had unknowingly mothered the product of her husband's adultery and her sister's deception. By evening, she didn't come out of her room. She lay there in silence, wrapped in a blanket that offered no warmth. Her phone rang several times. Her mother, a friend from church, even Chaik. She ignored them all. In that moment, the world had lost its meaning. She wasn't ready to confront them yet. She didn't want to scream. Not yet. She wanted to gather herself first. When she finally got up to pee, she looked into the mirror and saw a woman she didn't recognize. Pale, hollow, betrayed. She placed her hand gently on her flat belly and whispered, "Maybe it's good I never carried your child." Then she looked up at her own reflection and added, "Because I would have died if I had to share him with her." The house was quiet that night, but her silence was no longer weakness. It was the calm before the storm. It was a Tuesday, overcast and humid, the kind of weather that made everything feel heavier than it was. Amara's business trip to Port Harcourt had been canceled at the last minute due to a client emergency. Her bank's top executive had suffered a mild stroke, and all external meetings were called off. Instead of informing anyone she was returning early, Amara decided to surprise Chaik. She imagined how his face would light up when she walked in unexpectedly. Maybe they'd share a quiet dinner. Maybe this was God giving her a chance to reconnect. So she left work, picked up a bottle of his favorite red wine, and even stopped at his favorite grilled chicken spot. There was a renewed calm in her heart, a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, the distance could still be closed. She hadn't seen Ngozi in days either. According to their housekeeper, she had taken Junior to her friend's place for the weekend. But Amara suspected more. Still, she kept her thoughts buried. Until that evening. The compound was quiet when she arrived. Too quiet. There were no toys outside, no cartoon sounds from the living room, no faint gospel music playing in the background like usual. She opened the front door gently, expecting silence. Instead, she was met with something else, muffled laughter. Not from the living room. From her bedroom. Her bedroom. Her heartbeat stumbled. She closed the door behind her softly, placed the wine bottle on the table without a sound, and tiptoed forward, her heels in her hands. As she approached the hallway leading to the master bedroom, the laughter became clearer, Ngozi's voice playful and breathless. Then came a deep grunt. Chaik's voice. The same voice that used to tell her she was his everything. Now coated in sin. Now speaking a language meant only for lovers. Amara's entire body locked into paralysis. But her hand moved. It turned the doorknob slowly, almost instinctively. The door wasn't locked. She pushed it open. There, in the room she had decorated with her wedding pictures and embroidered sheets, lay her husband and her sister, entangled, breathless, skin pressed against skin. Chaik's back was arched. Ngozi's legs were wrapped around him. The air smelled of sweat, betrayal, and something final. They didn't see her at first. Amara stood in the doorway, completely still. Then Ngozi opened her eyes and froze. Her scream didn't come. She didn't grab a towel. She didn't even gasp. Instead, she smiled. Slowly. Sinfully. Chaik turned, confused by the change in energy, and when he saw Amara standing there, his entire face collapsed. He stumbled backward off the bed, grabbing the sheet, babbling, "I can explain, Amara, please." It's not." But he couldn't finish. Because she wasn't speaking. She wasn't shouting. She wasn't crying. She was just staring. Hollow. Numb. Broken beyond sound. She turned slowly, like a woman walking through fire, and left the room without a word. But silence this time wasn't peace. It was destruction preparing its throne. Amara didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She didn't collapse on the floor and weep. Instead, she walked quietly to the guest room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the wall for nearly an hour. Her fingers clutched her bag tightly, knuckles white. Inside, 1,000 memories were clawing at her ribs. The first time she introduced Chaik to Ngozi. The first time Ngozi moved in just for a while to job hunt in Lagos. The way Chaik had joked that Ngozi had grown into a fine woman. Every suppressed instinct, every overlooked red flag, every dismissed suspicion, now formed a noose tightening around her neck. But the pain wasn't just the betrayal. It was the scale of it, the longevity, the calculation, the ease with which they smiled in her face. The fact that her own bed had become their private sin chamber. She bit her lower lip so hard it bled. But still, she didn't speak. Because if she did, she wasn't sure she'd ever stop screaming. In the master bedroom, Chike was a mess. He had thrown on a pair of boxers and was pacing like a rat in a maze. He whispered, "Oh God, over and over, holding his head like he could rip out the guilt. Ngozi, however, wasn't shaken. She lay there, arms folded, watching the door like a queen who had just been dethroned, but was still smiling. So she saw us. Good, she said coldly. I'm tired of hiding. Chike turned to her in horror. Are you mad? That's your sister. Ngozi laughed. That's your wife. The silence that followed was worse than a slap. Chike opened his mouth to curse her, but he couldn't. He was just as guilty. He looked at the sheets, stained with their betrayal, and began to cry, not from remorse, but from fear. Ngozi stood up, wrapped herself in a silk robe, and walked past him. You should go check on her, she said, brushing her hand over his shoulder, before she does something stupid. Then she disappeared into the kitchen, like nothing had happened. But Amara wasn't doing anything stupid. She was doing something surgical. She walked into the living room, picked up her phone, and began deleting pictures. Wedding photos, vacation memories, birthday videos. Her smile in every one of them now looked like a mockery. Then she opened her notes app and began typing. A list, a plan, a goodbye. Chike crept into the living room, trembling. Amara, he started, voice soft like a thief begging for mercy. She looked up slowly and asked, How long? He stammered. Amara, how long, Chike? She repeated, eyes dry. Was it before or after she told me the baby was from Canada? Chike said nothing. That was his answer. She stood, walked past him, and whispered, I don't want an apology. I want you to remember this moment for the rest of your miserable life. Then she entered her room and locked the door. That night she didn't sleep, and neither did guilt. Morning came, not with peace, but with poison. Amara woke to find the house unusually quiet. She stepped into the corridor barefoot, her eyes heavy with darkness. She expected Ngozi to have left. But no, she was in the kitchen cooking scrambled eggs and whistling to herself, as if the night before had been a dream. Chike was nowhere to be seen. Amara stood there, watching, until Ngozi turned and smiled. Good morning, sis, she said sweetly, without a shred of shame. Amara didn't respond. She simply stared. Ngozi tilted her head and added, You look tired. Didn't sleep? The insult was coated in concern. Amara took a step forward and asked one question. Why? Ngozi's smile widened. Because I could. Because I wanted to. Because I was tired of being second best to you in everything. And guess what? She placed a hand on her hip, lifting her chin. Now I'm not. Amara blinked. Her hands clenched into fists. I gave you a home, she whispered. I fed you. Protected you. You were my blood. Ngozi rolled her eyes. Your blood? Please. You used me as your charity project. Always bragging about how you were helping your sister. Always looking down on me while pretending to lift me up. She stepped forward. But I gave him what you couldn't. A son. I gave him a reason to come home. You were too busy chasing promotion. The words sliced deep. Amara stared at her, every muscle in her body tightening. Ngozi added, You think being a wife is wearing a ring and paying bills? No, it's about filling a man's emptiness. I did that. Amara's hand flew without warning, a sharp slap across Ngozi's cheek. The sound echoed. Ngozi touched her face slowly, then smiled again. Good. Now you're awake. Chike stepped in at that exact moment, his face pale with dread. What's going on? He asked. Amara turned to him slowly. Tell her to leave, she said. Chike hesitated. 1 second. 2. 3. Then Ngozi laughed. Tell me to leave, she echoed. I'm not going anywhere. This house? The one I helped decorate? The kitchen I cook in? The man I gave a child? No, Amara. You're the one who doesn't belong anymore. Amara stood there, trembling, holding in every scream. Chike finally spoke. Ngozi, please, but his voice lacked authority. Ngozi walked past them both and entered the guest room. Let me feed my son, she called out. Chike looked at Amara, shame dripping off him like sweat. But Amara didn't break. Not yet. She stared at him, lips quivering. She gave you a child. I gave you everything else. Then she turned and walked to her room. But deep inside, something irreversible had snapped. This time, she wasn't going to pray about it. She was going to finish it. The next morning came with a silence that wasn't peace, it was preparation. Amara woke up and didn't reach for her phone, didn't check emails, didn't kneel to pray. Instead, she sat at her dressing table and stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. Not a single tear fell. Her face, once soft with trust, was now lined with scars invisible to the eye, but carved deep into her heart. She reached under the drawer and pulled out a brown envelope, divorce papers. They had been prepared 6 months ago when her suspicions first started piling up, but she wasn't ready then. Now she was. She reviewed them slowly, steady hands flipping through page after page, as if signing her name would remove the venom from her veins. Afterward, she placed them in a file, picked up a small backpack, and began packing quietly. She didn't take much, just her dignity, her documents, and the pieces of herself that hadn't been broken. Chike returned from dropping Junior off at school. His steps were cautious, like a man walking through a minefield. He found Amara sitting calmly in the living room, the file on the table in front of her. "You're leaving?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I've already left. This is just the physical part." He walked over and sat across from her, eyes red, lips quivering. "Amara, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I lost control." She looked at him and smiled sadly. "No, Chike, you didn't lose control. You handed it over willingly. And now I'm taking mine back." He tried to explain, to justify, to say things she had already heard in her nightmares. But she cut him off with a single sentence that froze his tongue. "Junior may be hers, but he's mine too." Chike blinked. "What?" Amara stood. "I fed him, bathed him, sang to him, paid his school fees. I mothered him. Don't ever forget that." And with that, she picked up her bag and walked toward the door. Ngozi emerged from the hallway with Junior's toys in hand, clearly eavesdropping. "So you're running away," she said with a smirk. Amara turned, her voice calm but sharp. "No, I'm choosing myself. Something you'll never understand." Ngozi rolled her eyes. "You think walking away makes you stronger? You're still barren. That won't change." Amara stepped closer, her eyes steady. "I'd rather be barren with integrity than be a mother who built her life on betrayal." Then she turned to Chike. "She gave you a child. I gave you a future. You chose temporary pleasure over permanent loyalty. Now live with that." She walked out, leaving the door wide open behind her. Chike stood still, stunned. Ngozi's smirk slowly faded. Outside, the sun shone like nothing had happened. But inside that house, the foundation had cracked forever. And for the first time in years, Amara breathed, free, unburdened, and unafraid. Years passed, but the echoes never left. Chike and Ngozi stayed together, but their relationship was anything but happy. They had the child, the home, the public illusion of unity. But behind closed doors, bitterness sat at the center of every meal. Chike could never look at Junior without remembering what he lost. Every smile reminded him of Amara. Every milestone reminded him of the wife who once loved him enough to give everything. He started drinking. His business declined. Neighbors noticed. Even Ngozi began to complain, "You're always depressed. This isn't the life we planned." But he didn't respond. He had nothing left to say. He had won the body, but lost the soul. And now, with every passing day, he realized that while Ngozi had given him a child, Amara had given him legacy, dignity, and peace. And now she was gone. Ngozi tried to hold the house together. She decorated, hosted parties, posted family photos, and smiled at church like a first lady. But inside, she knew she had lost something she could never recover. Amara's silence. It haunted her. The way Amara never fought, never screamed, never begged. Just walked away. She expected drama. She expected a breakdown. But instead, she got something worse. Indifference. And now, even Junior had begun asking questions. Where is Auntie Amara? Why don't we visit her? Each time, Ngozi would lie. She moved abroad. But Chike knew the truth. She didn't move abroad. She moved on. And he would never catch up. Junior grew cold toward them as he aged, distant, and harder to love. Even the sun they had weaponized slowly became a mirror reflecting their guilt. Meanwhile, Amara built a new life in quiet strength. She relocated to Abuja, started a non-profit for single women and abandoned wives, and never spoke Chike's name again. People asked, but she never gave details. We went our separate ways, she would say. But inside her, the lessons had been carved in stone. Never ignore your instincts. Never give your loyalty to those who see it as weakness. And never, ever betray yourself for love. One day, 6 years after she left, there was a knock at her office door. Her assistant entered. "There's a boy here to see you." He said, "He's your nephew." Amara stepped out, and there was Junior. Now 12, taller, wearing the same sharp eyes as his father. He smiled shyly. "Mummy said not to come, but I wanted to." Amara bent down, eyes full. "I've been waiting." She hugged him, and in that moment, she felt it, not motherhood, not revenge, but healing. The storm had ended, and what remained was peace. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel Tochi Stories for more.